Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boy Daze, and you're about to watch Thorin rant for about 3 hours.
Right, this is going to be Daring Minds. I'm Thorin, that's Geo, and here is Sean Gares, our guest. And obviously, he is currently like a content creator for Shopify Rebels. Before that, he was working for 100 Thieves. Before that, he used to be on the VCT. Then he used to be a veteran 1.6 in-game leader, was in the semi-finals of the first major. It was all downhill after that. And actually, he was in a few finals internationally after that. Him and Skadoodle and Shroud almost won. Actually, they almost won like 3 tournaments, but then didn't quite because that was just NA back then. That was actually a miracle to even make a final. And then he also was in a bunch of quarterfinals. Actually, believe it or not, you know, here's a random piece of information if you're an old school fan. You know how everyone's like, I'm so glad Nip won that one major. Sean isn't, because that was the most bullshit one where they weren't even that good and they robbed it from him. He actually was going to win that one, but they just stole it on. And literally, are you ready for this, Geo? If you ever think any other TO is bad, right? Valve told people for this major, we're going to make 2 maps, or you can't play them. They're just going to come out at the major. And also, we're putting a randomizer on the 3rd map. So what happened was, when he was playing what was the greatest team ever, right? He played them when they were in the worst form ever. They crept into the quarterfinals. It goes to the 3rd map. The randomizer chooses one of the new maps that is completely busted and is not good at all. And then he loses 16-14. It's like,
Dude.
Is that like Vietnam for you when I brought that up there?
Dude, you're so right, though. It was best of 3s, and you only have 1 ban, and there's 2 maps that you've never played before. So it's like,
I know, exactly. Yeah, there's the other thing. You didn't even get the 2 vetoes because obviously it just decided the map. So there was always at least one chance you could get a bad one. And by the way, Nip actually just used that to win the whole major. That was almost like, look, I'd never make something statement like this. I'm a journalist. I have to seriously uphold certain standards. But I feel like, or think, looked a bit rigged, you know. Just saying,
loved that
whatever.
randomizer. Loved watching that land on cobble 8 times in a row.
Oh, it was ridiculous, wasn't it? I know, it was. Anyway, obviously now we are in Valorant. We can put all that behind us because everyone knows there's no problem with the maps in Valorant. Anyway, VCT Tokyo, how about that, eh? That big tournament going on over the other side of the world. Let's just start here, Sean. Obviously, one of the teams that people were hyped for in America and actually has lived up to the billing so far is Evil Geniuses. They even got there. They managed to actually do pretty well in the group. They're in the playoffs now. What do you think?
Dude, America's fucking owns. Like, I don't know if I could drop F-bombs.
Yeah.
I might get
I do it all the time, man.
But okay. Dude, it's insane watching the VCT Americas teams just shit on teams right now. Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, EG turned around ever since they brought in this Demon 1 guy. I'd never heard of him, right?
I didn't know this, but someone told me he was from like another game, like Call of Duty or something. What was the game, Gio? He's from some other game, like recently. It wasn't even from Valorant.
No, I thought that he was like just like played on a couple of like tier 3 teams or something, and like he.
Someone told me he's like some wizard from another game, and he just swapped to Valorant.
I don't know. Maybe it was like Paladins.
Let me have a look.
I'm gonna Google it. It doesn't say on his Wikipedia.
I mean, apparently his history on Wikipedia.
Unreal Tournament 4.
There you go, Unreal Tournament 4. So not even vaguely a game like Valorant, by the way. So okay, fair enough. He must have good aim then.
Dude, yeah, he's a god. He's literally the GOAT of NA. Like, this guy is insane in the future. But I don't know how EG turned it around so quickly. And that's just all the credit has to go to Potter, right? Because I remember like week 2 or something like that of VCT Americas. I was basically like, guys, look at their last five best of 3s. They've won like 6 attack rounds. Like, I think it was like an average of 4 attack rounds a game. It was like over 5 best of 3s. They were averaging like 4 attack rounds.
What's the usual good amount of attack rounds?
It was those first 2 games of Americas that they hadn't changed the roster yet. So Demon 1 wasn't actually in the roster at this point.
What's like a usual good amount of rounds to get on the T side, attack side, basically, Sean? What's it usually supposed to be?
I mean,
roughly?
It depends on the map.
Way more than that, though, like, presumably, right?
Yeah, they were playing like attack maps like Haven, where you know you can watch a team like NRG put up like 8 to 9 rounds consistently, and they were getting like 2.
Right.
They would win their defensive half like 9-3 and lose the game. It was like, what's actually happening? They looked so clueless. And then watching how they've changed and like learned how to play with each other over the course of VCT Americas was one of the most incredible things ever. And then they obviously needed a coach, an assistant coach, to knife someone on 100 Thieves to even make the playoffs of VCT Americas. And then they beat like Cloud9, NRG. Like, their run was just so insane because Cloud9 was, at that time, they looked like the best team in VCT Americas. They looked like they could even beat Loud. Like, we were putting them in the power rankings as number 1. And they just shit on Cloud9. Like, they actually just dunked on them in that playoff game. Let me find the scores of these games.
I mean, obviously, what must have happened is, what Potter did was, after she snaked the guys from NRG, what happened is she got all of their scrim blocks from all the other good teams and then leveled up. It's sort of like the, like hyperbolic time chamber from Dragon Ball Z, I guess. Obviously, that never really happened. We would only joke about that on this show, Potter, of course.
Chet was not happy.
Yeah.
Chet was pissed. Yeah, it was 13-5, 13-2 against a team that I think was like 18-3 in regular season, or 17-4 in regular season maps. 17-4 plus 70 round differential. To put that into perspective, Loud was 16-7 in maps and plus 46. And they just destroyed them in playoffs. All of a sudden, the EG players were just popping off at an insane rate, like individually, and everything was working. And they're carrying that through here. And honestly, they're like a live dog to actually make a deep run in playoffs. Like I have them. It's very unlucky that they're playing.
They got the hardest first round opponent, right?
Yeah.
I'm so gutted they're playing Loud in the first game.
Yeah,
definitely sucks for someone, because even if they win, then Loud goes to the low bracket immediately. So in your first match, so
it also sucks because DRX and PRX are playing each other. So if you could have just swapped those, then you wouldn't have had the two regions where they're facing a domestic opponent. Like that would have been nice, because I'm getting flashbacks to MSI where like it was all the same regions that were facing each other. It'd be nice if they could have just made that not possible.
Well, so I actually was like going over like bracket possibilities before this bracket was released, and I don't understand truthfully how EG is playing Loud in this opening round. Like if I'm being honest, like I don't understand it, because Loud is a 1 seed, right? They won VCT Americas. EG is a 1 seed coming out of groups. They went 4-0 in groups, like no one beat them. Right? Like,
are they not supposed to face each other?
So,
well, I mean, there's 4 1 seeds is the problem. The basic problem is this:
3 1 seeds, because Fnatic plays 2 in EMEA, right? So Fnatic
you're right.
Can play a second seed, but you would think that the Pacific team would be the lowest of the 1 seeds, because you would think they would use lock-in results, where EMEA was 1, Loud was 2, so Loud should be like the second 1 seed, and then PRX should be the third. But they gave PRX like the second seed, clearly, or maybe even the 1 seed overall, because they're playing DRX, who's the second seed coming out of groups.
Yes.
So I don't know. I think EG should be playing like Paper X.
Here's the thing. I think that is a good idea, like you say, because it would give another thing to play for at lock-in, that you're also like represent your region and get a better spot. They do something similar a bit in League, where you sometimes get a slot taken away if teams do too badly at Worlds and stuff. The problem is, though, that is a classic Riot approach to international tournaments, though, because what they will never do is admit that regions are stronger or weaker. So to this day, in League of Legends, if you are the number 1 seed from LEC, Europe, or LCS, they pretend like you're equal to the number 1 seed from Korea, and it means the groups can be really crazy, because you can get either the American team, which might be true. Like
they usually seed the number 1 from the LCS against the number 2 from Korea, right? That's how MSI was seeded, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but that's MSI. This is Worlds we're talking about. Don't worry, I've only watched League of Legends for 10 years. I know you've played like a few games of like fucking Team or something, but Anyway, the point is that what they won't do, unfortunately, is because they think it's like they're trying to be like too egalitarian, Sean. They're trying to be like every region could be good, man. Like I don't want to judge them before we see them play, which is all well and good. But the problem is, like in this scenario, like we're saying, we want to be cynical. We want to at least guess which one's probably more likely good. Also, that's why I wouldn't even mind the idea that the results sort of like shift what the next seedings are. Like, hey, if Paper X wins this tournament, maybe Pacific is number 1 seed next time, maybe you do it like that. Maybe you make it fair. So anyway, what about this then? So when they actually play against Loud, Gio, who's going to win this match?
I still think that Loud will win it. I said to you in the last episode that we did that I think Loud are going to make the finals. And I said that EG were the team that I expected to do better than people expected. So I still believe in both of those things. I think that EG can make a deep run, but I mean, it's an interesting one because obviously they've played each other in Americas, so they kind of are familiar with each other as opponents and maybe have a little bit more to go off of from a first-person perspective. And there's always the chance that EG do really well. I mean, it'd be great if it could be like a 2-1 or something like that, but I do think that Loud are just such a monolith at the moment. Just in terms of like, when you consider every single player on that roster and what they can bring to the table and do bring to the table. I mean, Aspas is obviously a really easy person to go to, but I think when you think of players like Les, Sadak's an insane, like just his brain is wild. But also like a player who I always bring up is like when you consider a player like Thoorin, and I think it's really easy to kind of forget the controller. But one thing that's really good about him is like not only is his actual utility usage really good, but he is really good at playing independently around his own utility. So the number of times you'll see him like come out of a smoke and he'll just get like 3 kills because he just has the intuition for that. I think is something that like when you have that little, you know, the average sort of goes up because of little things like that as well. And so I just think that Loud are probably too set in stone in terms of how good they are to lose to EG, but that doesn't mean I think that EG can't make it a competitive game.
Who have you got, Sean?
Yeah.
Jump in, by the way, anytime you have thoughts. Go on.
No, like I agree with what Gio said. Like Loud in my eyes, I mean, like I said, I've been super into VCT Americas. I've worked it. That's like the region that I'm in, and I've never seen anything like this in Valorant. Like in a game where variance is so fucking high, these guys eliminate all variance and just own everyone. Like if you look at their history, only like 4 teams ever have beaten them. Ever. Like going back to January 2022, they have played like dozens of best of 3s, best of 5s even. They've lost to the Optic Core a couple, like 4 times, right? They've lost to Crew and they lost to Fnatic in the lock-in finals. Those are the 3 like cores that they've lost to. You can basically say like the Crew one, that would probably never happen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a one-off. The Optic one is the only one that's like consistently happening. Like Optic, Envy, and
they were the best
NRG.
team, right?
Yeah, they lost to NRG in like week 7 of Americas. It's because FNS and Chet can really like do a lot of anti-ing on them, but these guys are insane. Like they innovated the game. You have to realize everyone in the entire world thought Harbor was just dog shit, and then they come into lock-in, and if you look at this 2E guy's stats, they brought him in, and he was a duelist main. He was a fucking duelist main. This guy played Jet and Raze for his entire career, but they decided like, oh, we're going to put him on Harbor. And they made Harbor Viper the meta. And it's not the meta if you look at like EMEA or in some maps, maybe like Pearl, it became the meta because of them. But in lock-in, this guy had only played a handful of Harbor games. Right now, he's played 19 Harbor games. Right now, he's the best Harbor in the world by far. Like, it's not even close. And it's not like he's putting up insane stats on Harbor, but the way he controls his util and can control rotations and maps as like an XCS pro is insane. Like, he's denying info all around the map with all of these walls and shit that he's throwing everywhere. His cove placements are like perfect. And it's gotten better since the lock-in finals, obviously, because now he has more reps. I am just the biggest Loud fanboy because
is this lineup of Loud better than the old one, the one where before the players went to Sentinels?
That's a good question. I wouldn't be able to answer that because honestly, like I didn't follow them the way I do now.
Oh, fair enough.
I was very aware of how good they were, and I watched them obviously in these big events. But the way they set the meta with Harbor Viper now, with like Fraud as the coach, and their creativity in always being able to deny info in new ways. And then they have this guy, Osbus, who just doesn't miss, and you can't hit him because his movement is ridiculous. They're just such a dangerous team. I don't know. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'll give an answer to that question. I think that for what the game is now, I think their current roster suits it better than the last one would have. And that's not anything against Sassy and Pancada and their abilities. But my argument more comes from the fact that you have to take this with a pinch of salt just because it is a different environment. But Sassy and Pancada have both, since joining Sentinels, had to try and flex off of what their original roles were, which is pretty important for the current meta and just the way that it's played. You'll notice that a lot of the best teams in the world are teams where you can be flexible with your roles. And I think that Cowanzine and Tui's are and Sadak. Like, I think that when you look at the kind of flexibility with these players right now, they've actually seemed to have had better results on flexing off of what their original roles were than you've seen Sassy and Pancada have while they've been on Sentinels. Now, again, that is like an environmental thing because you don't know what's happening inside Sentinels. It could be that in a different team environment that Sassy and Pancada would have had an easier time doing that. But just from what we have seen and kind of like empirical like evidence or whatever, I think like the current iteration of the roster seems very well suited to what Valorant is now.
I do think I agree. And something that was true back then that it's hard to compare the two is when you listen to their interviews now, Saucy was very harsh on them as like almost like a father figure in that team and expected like the world out of the players and was one of those players that would really hold his teammates accountable, which sometimes doesn't really jive very well with like younger players, right? They just want to kind of vibe out and have fun. And when he left, you can go back and look at the interviews. It's not all like sunshine and roses, right? Like they didn't have like perfect relationships. And you could say that for pretty much like any esports team ever that's successful. Like they learn how to work with each other and play at a very high level. But I think he instilled a lot of the things in them that carried through to this day that make them great. So I don't like comparing the two because I think without that era, they would never be where they are now.
That built the foundation, yeah. By the way, for people who don't know, Fraud, I mean, me and Sean know this, is a super old school. He was like a legendary 1.6 player. But the funny thing was, he was an AWPer, so those usually aren't actually considered the cerebral players. And in CSGO, he very briefly played because Jason Lake brought him back to his old team, Complexity. And at the time, I can tell you, he basically just forced those players to take him because he was like, oh, he's going to practice, don't worry. He never made it as a pro, and he tried to do coaching. He was coaching like Small Patrol and some of the like almost like invite level is what you call it, where it's just like lower tier 1 of NA. And actually what's funny is that because I'm mates with him, I even wrote a guide with him like 10, 15 years ago or something in CS. So I know that in CSGO, he actually always thought that all the teams he was on, like he actually thought he should have a shot at a bigger team basically, but his whole shit was like the modern players are all entitled and they don't want to work hard and they don't want to like grind and they also want to like play the scrims for fun and then go to the LAN and just hope you do well. So it's actually interesting that he's ended up with this group of players and actually an amazing team. And also, if people don't know, I hadn't thought of this at the time, but because his heritage is he's Cuban, even though he's actually, I think, born in America. So I know he speaks Spanish, so I assume he understands a bit of Portuguese even, because that was also the other thing. We know from CSGO that in theory, it hasn't really worked to do in NA players with Brazilians, but I guess if he can understand the language, maybe it works for him. What do you think, Sean?
Dude, wildest shit ever. And great shout out, by the way, in his past. Like, I actually like probably forgot about that. I obviously was coming up as a player in 1.6 and like in, the upper echelons with Fraud. And he was so harsh, man.
Oh,
like,
for sure.
He would be like MM1ing in scrims, like talking shit and knowing like Jordan later on nothing. He was, and Tommy.
Oh, he was harsh as fuck on those guys, yeah.
Bro, like he was an insane teammate apparently. Like this guy, again, he's just like Saucy actually. He was just like Saucy. And seeing him in a coaching role now, like for this Loud team. So he helped them out at Champions last year when they won. He was like behind the scenes helping them. And that's why after they ended up picking him up as the head coach. But he moved to Brazil to fully immerse in the culture and learn Portuguese in like 6 months.
Wow. I mean, he did have the foundation in Spanish, but it's still crazy,
Yeah. I know, there's a lot of Spanish inside of Portuguese, right? But still, like...
No, respect.
That's fucking insane, right?
Yeah. That's cool.
And a lot of pressure. He joined the best team in the world and kept them there. Like,
and I'll even say, like, just like I said, some of those CSGO pros, it's why I wonder if some of those CSGO pros told this guy, because good old Zombs, who is like, look, he's not as good, so I guess he isn't the double lift of Valorant, but he's got as big a fucking mouth, and he's always talking absolute shite out of his arse. Like that stupid thing where he said how Richard Lewis, like, Jack paid Richard Lewis to write, like, the iBuy Power Match figures. That guy's just a bonehead, but it's okay. He's on Sentinels. That was the right team for him. Right fucking, the FaZe clan, as it were, of Valorant. So, okay, I noticed he even called Fraud like a check stealer right before all this like insane run where they start winning all the games. Like, so if in some ways that's like the reverse curse. If Zomb says you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, you're probably a genius because he just can't process what you're saying at that point. Just listen. I'm not even in this game, Sean, but you know my style. I just right. With the Tommy gun. That's how I do it, mate. Right, let's talk about some more teams then. Right. So obviously, before we go to the other playoff matches, the big shocks were, it's mainly Navi, right? What the fuck happened to Navi? They were supposed to potentially be a team that could win this tournament.
has to be like the biggest disappointment, right? Like, what the fuck happened to EMEA in general, not just Navi? It's like, I don't know. Like, you watch them and they were like a shell of what they used to look like, right? I don't know what it is. Like, they were messing around with comps maybe too much, and they couldn't really get their footing under them. They couldn't really figure out like what worked. And when you watch them at this event, they just didn't have enough creativity, right? Coming into a big event like this, when you have to go through the group stage, you better be creative as hell. Like, you better have ult plays, you better have pistols, and they didn't have those things. And I don't know, like, it's not from a lack of skill or anything like that. It's like the little things, right, that typically makes teams make deep runs, is you have to like kind of upset your initial matches by creating a lot of stuff that teams aren't aware of. And then later on in the tournament, that's when teams like NRG start shining that can like mid-round. And that's when a team like Navi would shine as well. But they need to get through those initial games. The initial games are insane, right? Because everyone hasn't seen each other's styles, and there's no VODs, there's no demos or anything like that to go off of. And you're potentially on like new patches. So Valorant operates in a way different way than CS. And NRG had to learn that the hard way. That's why NRG would constantly get like bounced in these early games, and like teams like Xerxia would give them trouble. But then they would make runs to the finals once they like got the footage. Once they got the footage and they understood how the teams played, they could make those deep runs. And Navi just couldn't get out. They just couldn't get off the gate, right? Like, they didn't have enough creativity to get past those initial games. And yeah, that's it.
What are your thoughts on the Navi lack of a run, and even losing the EDG? That's the other shocker, right? It's one thing if someone else had upset someone and you played like T1 and NRG. They even lost to EDG. The team no one knows if they're any good.
To be fair, I think after EDG's couple of games, like, you can kind of look at it now and be like, okay, I understand why they lost to EDG, but I guess we'll get to them. But yeah, like, I mean, to be honest, Sean, like, the thing that you said, which was basically what I was going to say, was the lack of creativity. It was really eye-opening to me in their game versus NRG, particularly on Ascent, which was Navi's pick, where it looked kind of like they kept trying to do the same thing sort of over and over, whereas every single round, NRG had something different up their sleeve, like a different play, a different, like, different positions they were going to take, a different opening, like whatever it may be. Navi were very cautious about things. They played a lot like as a group, like they would have like maybe Sugetsu would be like lurking somewhere, and the other four would just be together. Like, you wouldn't really see anyone going off and doing their own thing. And then at times where they were being a little less cautious and they were making pushes, for example, like doing a mid push rather than just ignoring mid, it would be kind of relying upon CNED to get an opening kill, which, okay, his role is the person that you would hope to get the opening kill, and he was doing pretty well against Ardis, but still, like, it felt like it sort of had to be him. And then even if he did get that, there would be a lack of diligence. So there were so many examples where, I don't know, for example, I remember there being a kill that CNED got onto Ardis in like Market in Ascent, and then he just walked into Fruit Market and there's somebody else in there and just like traded him straight away because Navi didn't clear it. They just assumed that it was clear. And I think that there were a lot of examples of things like that. I mean, Lotus was a bit more of like a weird map because that actually went into overtime. And so there were like some individual plays where you would see Navi or a member of Navi do something really good. Like, there were times where like Sugetsu would be in the back of a site and he'd get like 3 kills that he had no right to get. Or Angel, like on an Omen, would do a TP to somewhere that you wouldn't expect him to TP, and like he actually catches some players out. But it always seemed like NRG were so much happier to, I don't want to say go balls to the wall, but like just to play more aggressively. They weren't afraid. Whereas like Navi just looked limited. And that was the crazy thing, because Angel's never been that IGL that you look at and you go, oh yeah, this guy's limited in terms of what he's got up his sleeve. But that is exactly how they looked, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to shit on these teams, I swear, like, but having been on like 100 Thieves and coaching them, it's very hard. It's very hard because you're always trying to play for like the next game. And so there's not really ever much time to truly innovate because you're just trying to like survive.
You're going to maintain what you got, right?
Yeah, you're just trying to survive and maintain what you got, especially if you struggle through playoffs to get here. and then you have to play group stage like early. They just don't have enough time, and they wasted time trying out these Yoru comps that never panned out. And when you waste time like that, you're so fucked.
By the way, what would you say on that? As someone who comes from a CSGO, and then obviously, particularly you were coaching 100 Thieves, contrast that to CSGO for people who don't know. Because as you said, that's one of the things I didn't even thought about with Chet. Like, one of the things he was famous for was he'll download all the demos the night before the game and try and get all the anti-strats like the next day. The team's like, what the fuck? They know all our moves. What do you do when there's no demos? Like, you just try and get the VOD and reverse engineer roughly what they're doing?
Yeah, so the way people perceive Valorant is so funny because they're just so wrong. Like, Counter-Strike is a game of who can make the least mistakes. You have the same utility. You're spawning off of, like, in spawn. You're not on barriers. So there's so many less options available to you in Counter-Strike, right? Everyone has the same utility. You're spawning, like, super far away, so you can't get places really quick. Like, you can't be at B before you could be at A because the barriers and shit like that. It's totally different. And then Valorant, there might be like 1,000 ways to win around. So it's who can be the most creative and beat the other team's game plan a lot of the times.
Right.
Or who can surprise a lot with like an ult or a certain position or a comp. You know, like there's a million ways to win around in Valorant. And it's about, you know, like, is my way the best way? And that's where like the innovation comes in. And it's very weird. It took NRG a little bit of time to understand that. And now that they do, if you look at how NRG operates, they have like 2 comps on every map. Right. And FNS actually said that in like a recent interview. And before their Cloud9 game, this was the craziest fucking thing I've ever seen. In VCT America's playoffs, before they even qualified, they played Cloud9 in like the lower bracket, and they just copied their comp. A comp that they had never run before on Lotus.
Oh, they just first timed it as a comp, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Holy
shit. Like overnight. They had like one night
Right.
to prep. But they can do that because they're all ex-CS pros. You know, that's a huge advantage that NRG has always had. Because it doesn't matter what comp they run. They understand the fundamentals of like spacing, trading, timing,
Right.
rotations. And they can use that on any comp and like play off of each other really well. That's why I always said like, you can't copy what NRG does if you're just like a normal Valorant team, because you don't have that experience. Like you'll never be able to play like they do in the mid round because they have like 10 years of CS experience behind all of those decisions. Yeah. Yes. So they have a huge edge in that regard where they can just like flip the comp on you like immediately. And they didn't used to do that. They didn't think they had to because they're CS players. They thought they had to make the least mistakes. And now they understand they don't have, it's not like that. I guarantee you when they play Fnatic in this opening round, they're probably not running the comps we saw in group stage, which is crazy to say. Like they've only had a couple days to prep, but I still think that's what's going to happen.
What do you think of that matchup, by the way, Gio? It's obviously a banger right there, NRG Fnatic.
Fnatic versus NRG. So this is actually the of the 3 questions you asked me on the last episode, this is the one that I've become the most unsure about, because I said that NRG were the team that I thought would underperform, right? And I'm not so sure anymore. I mean, I also was like, yeah, Fnatic are going to get to the finals. And I actually really don't want it to be a Fnatic Loud finals because I don't like repeat finals. I really would like to believe that, like, just off the back of everything that Sean just said and about how NRG have become really good at bringing surprises and doing them well because they can apply that creativity and they can apply their experience. Like, I would like to believe that they can subvert the expectations of Fnatic, because I think Fnatic are they're a very structured team. I think one of the biggest things that people compliment Fnatic on is, okay, yeah, obviously you have some really insane players. I'm not going to take away the fact that, like, Durka, for example, is one of the most mechanically gifted players we have in the game. But the thing that makes Fnatic so good is, like, the cerebral shit behind it, right? And it's, like, the thought that goes into their decision making and stuff like that. And I think that a team like NRG, who not only is really good at countering things, but is also really comfortable to just do something brand new, is the sort of team that can really disrupt a team like Fnatic. That said, I am really, like, lost on who to say that I think would win. I mean, I think I would still lean towards Fnatic, and part of that, and this is maybe a really flimsy reason, and it's definitely influenced by the fact that we haven't seen Fnatic play yet, but part of that is influenced by the fact that NRG are, as far as I'm aware, the only team who have qualified into the playoffs who went to all 3 maps on both of their games. And so I'm like, okay, when you kind of have the benchmark where you look at a team like EDG and their game against Navi, and then you see NRG versus Navi, and yeah, NRG still looked better than them, but Navi still took a map off of them. Stuff like that is where I'm like, okay, are they as like absolutely incredibly perfect as we kind of make them sound like in the way that we describe them and the way they go about? And that is a flimsy reason, but I have to have something.
Okay. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, it's so hard, man, because like it's easy to just sit here and be like, oh yeah, Fnatic's the best team in the world, but it's like their style is so different than Loud, and it's going to be an interesting clash as like Harbor Viper from like NRG going against Fnatic, because Fnatic doesn't run the Harbor Viper, and I've seen in Americas everyone just fall in line like fucking NPCs with Loud, right? Like week 1 they were running Harbor Viper, and I was like, ooh, I can't wait to see like a team run a single controller like the way Fnatic does, and like double initiator and go against this Harbor Viper. And very quickly I was like, oh wait, that's all it is Harbor Viper. Like every fucking team is just falling in line with what Loud's doing, and they're trying to beat them at their own game. And I think that's because the way scrims were going is they couldn't beat Harbor Viper.
Right.
And it's not like they're just blindly following like idiots, right? Like there's a reason for it.
Yeah,
there's a reason why Chet and FNS did this.
Yes.
And it's probably because they were getting bodied in scrims by Harbor Viper. So on the other hand, I know that Fnatic, who had like an undefeated season, and they had like the Patriots type thing where they just literally lost the Super Bowl. But the thing is, the Super Bowl didn't fucking matter. They still got to buy it. That led to the playoffs because they won lock-in. And because of that, I think they're saving Strats. And I never say that in any fucking
No,
game.
in CSGO, you're supposed to, like I said, in CSGO, it's just a fan thing. But actually, there's a logic to it in this kind of scenario, right? Because it doesn't really matter if you come first or second if you're going to try and win the tournament with some secret shit, right? Because as you said, there's no demos.
Why would you waste your ult plays? Why would you show a comp that maybe you're hiding? Why would you show a pistol round that might have 100% success rate? Why? There's no point. So like I think they're coming into this tournament with a lot of shit up their sleeve. And I have them as like heavy favorites over NRG in this opening game. That's not to say that NRG wouldn't beat them in like the lower bracket later on when there's footage, but this opening game is just going to be so fucking hard for NRG. That's why I think they need to have a comp change. And I think they're going to have like weird comps they run or some crazy ideas, because the shit that you're about to see from Fnatic is crazy. Now, there is something to having like the hot hand, like the way NRG played groups and
getting warmed up and everything. Yeah,
they've experienced the days of playing on stage, which is big. It's very big. Like it's not something that typically happened in CS when I was a player. I guess in majors sometimes teams would get like the buys, right? But it's different. Like the way that NRG got the reps with the crowd, they get to understand what it's like being there early and having that late game, and like the flow of your day is very different, right? And NRG has those reps now under them. So there's that, right? Where they're not going to feel shocked on the stage. And I'm not saying that Fnatic players will feel shocked, but that first game, there's a little bit of jitters, right? I'm going to say that. And that's like my one cope if I'm like an NRG fan.
Okay. By the way, I'll just throw out there as well. The other thing that I always think is cool is when you're a team that, like the core of the NRG team, when they were Optic, had so much experience going deep, winning tournaments. The other thing is those teams, even if they don't look that great or they look a little bit shaky on the way, you know how it is. Like the former champions, they're just like, just get me to the playoff match. If you get me to there, then we can have we can just have a throwback game. We can win. We can use experience against them, etc. So obviously both teams are really good, but let's see, maybe it'll be a banger match.
True. I think it will. Yeah. It'll definitely be a great match. I
can't see it being a shit game.
By the way, what do you make then, Gio, of EDG then? Because obviously this is one of the teams where it was really hard to know, will they even get out of groups? Yeah. Can they? In theory, in their group, some people might have had them as the worst team in the group. Who knows?
Oh my God. EDG really surprised me, but I don't think I'm unique in that. I mean, and admittedly, a lot of that is because I didn't know a lot about them. Like, who does really know a lot about the Chinese teams, to be honest? But I mean, everybody's obviously talking about KangKang, which is their duelist, who just seems to be. I mean, if you're looking at just a raw jet skill, like, has to be like a top 3, at least at this tournament, right? Just, he's ridiculous.
Okay.
But I feel like the team as a whole, oh my God, if we're talking about creativity in teams, like, this team, they are like not afraid to do things that seem to be slightly outside the bubble, even if they're just really small things. That, like, there were certain moments in their game versus T1, there would be certain tiny little things where I'd be like, wait, hold on, that's not how you play Valorant. And it would be like Haodong, who's their smoker, like pushing onto B site fracture to, like, as the opening, like, contact, right? Or like he would like push through a molly to go and like put a plant down in a place where he's going to be super vulnerable, and you're like, hold on a fucking second. Not only did he just do that, when that's dumb, except it's not dumb because it worked, and also they're still like mowing down T1 on top of this because they are forcing T1 into such serious submission. The other thing is, like, speaking of them forcing T1 into submission, there'd be so many instances where they had such a good read on what free space they had elsewhere on the map that T1 weren't gonna re-clear, or like maybe assumed was safe, because the number of fucking flanks that like this team could just pull off, it didn't matter what player it was. It could be any fucking player on the team. It just doesn't matter. And they would just be able to like go around another part of the map, like later on, and they would just be able to make these pinches and these little sandwiches and shit like that, like serving up fucking T1 on a bagel. Like, I don't know. There's just like...
Right. Someone write all these down. They're pretty good lines. This is good material. Keep going.
Thanks. This team was whack. And I mean, one player as well, who I haven't even really mentioned at this point, who I was so impressed by just on an individual skill level, was Chichu. Like, I feel like you get a lot. It's really interesting looking at the kind of Sentinel role at the moment, because you have some more passive Sentinels who are just like leaning more into the lurk, but they don't necessarily expect to like pop off or do much. And you get people who are a lot more kind of active in terms of part of that, like the aggression and whatever. And Chichu is a player that, like, I don't remember which the first game, because I had to go, because of time zones, I had to go back and watch these as VOD. So I don't remember which was the first one that I watched. But at first I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy seems like he can kind of clutch when he needs to. And as I was like watching more and more of these series, I was like, hold the fuck on. Like, this guy literally he just doesn't, like, he can be close range, it can be long range, it can be like fucking at any pressurized part or unpressurized part. He can like go and take space. He can be having his space encroach upon. It doesn't matter. Like, this guy is insane. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm a fan now. And I really underestimated them just because I was like, I just, I was like, yeah.
Dude, I feel you. This is, you know what I feel like this is, Duncan? We're watching MJ when he first came into the NBA. Like, we're watching him in like 89 right now when we watch KangKang. Like, give this guy a year. I swear to God, this team is just getting exponentially better every time I see them. They're now understanding like fundamentals, mid-rounding, positioning, timings. Like, their hits are nice, but their players are so goddamn skilled. I swear to God, I have never seen anything like this. I have never seen anything like it. Like, Smoggy's winning clutches with like 12 HP, one-shotting the two people. KangKang never misses an op shot, like, ever. And his crosshair placement's not great. Like, that's the crazy part. His crosshair placement's like, he's just whipping all over the place. It's like when I first played CSGO against Skadoodle, and his name was like Weh, and he just wasn't missing, and I thought he was cheating. I was like, this guy is bullshit. Like, what the fuck? And then I ended up playing with him, obviously, years later. Like, that's what it feels like when I watch them. Like, they definitely are the best mechanical team I have ever seen.
Ooh, okay.
Without a doubt. It's like watching FaZe a long time ago in CSGO, where they just stack the
superstar
team
lineup. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have a puncher's chance against any team they play.
Okay.
Any team.
I've got an interesting angle for you on this then, because obviously, like you said, if I put the framework you said earlier, that whereas in CSGO it's about making the fewest mistakes, and in Valorant it's more like be creative and like force the opponent into doing stuff, and you can even just use mechanics, etc. Well, if you know in CSGO, the team that we had from China, Tai Lu, what always fucked them is that they played mega aggressive. They had good aimers, but they didn't understand the European meta. So what happened is they could get like a BO1 upset, but if they played in a best of 3, they get picked apart. Like the good teams essentially would know how like the site setups and how you punish them. Yeah. And one of the reasons why I actually know why the Chinese players often have very good aim and this crazy style is because they really do come from those LAN cafes where you have the shitty little mouse mat, no joke, like a really basic mouse. And so you use a high sensitivity. It's a real thing. Whereas in CSGO, people don't know. Generally, you use the low sensitivity and like everyone knows this stuff. But basically, though, as a result, I can see how the game could be different. Like if you're just mechanically super good, I mean, we've seen this from Paper X, right? You could tear these teams up, especially if they don't know what's coming.
They make Paper X look like amateurs.
Especially if you've never seen the VODs or you can't interpret the VOD because it's a different region, you know? It must be a shock to play these guys the first time.
How does this work though? I thought like Valorant's still in like beta in China. Like they haven't even had access to the game that long.
I bet they've been grinding like a motherfucker. That's the other thing. I heard they used to just grind so hard on all the FPS games.
Well, can you only play like 3 hours a week in China if you're like under 18? Or they're all like 19. So like how are they so good?
This has almost changed my opinion about like the whole developing region thing, because I've like looked at this and I've looked at how EGD play, and I'm like, if they can do that, given how like new and inaccessible Valorant is in China, and the fact that they don't have their own league, they're not like, I don't know if they can scrim with teams that are outside of China or anything like that. I'm like, if they can do that and they can be this fucking good, no one has an excuse. Like, there is no excuse that you can put in front of me for any other region, any other level of experience, any other whatever. There's nothing. There just isn't one.
They're the best team. I swear they're going to be the best team in like 2 years. Like mark it down. Like the best team is coming out of China in like 2 years. I think
like here's also the thing. They're going to be facing Team Liquid, and Liquid, when you consider the two team cores that made the current Team Liquid, so Old Team Liquid and Old Gambit, two of the most like rigid structured teams, and I guess that's kind of an EMEA thing anyway, but like really, really like structured in the way that they play. And then you've got this team who are going to come in, do whatever the fuck they want. Half of it's going to be shit that Liquid will have never seen before or won't be expecting or won't necessarily be accounting for. And then even if that shit goes wrong, they'll just change it mid-round and they'll make it right? Like this is going to be so like really, really at best annoying for Liquid, at worst absolutely devastating for Liquid. Yeah. I think just in the way that they play.
By the way, just as an aside, I'll just throw this out there for comedic effect as well. They've also done that thing where they pick mad names because English isn't their first language. So in CSGO, this is not a joke. One of the players on the best Chinese team had the name Somebody. They have a fucking player called Nobody. Both of those, you should know this as casters, are a fucking nightmare if you're a caster, because like the amount of shit jokes that they get, you know, somebody gets a 3K. Well, who is it, Dan? Just tell me who. Somebody. Yes, I know that, but who? Like it's
like
fucking,
something on Paper X.
Yeah, there's also or is there? We'll find out in a second. No one technically knows. Apparently they're leaving him like fucking Sting in WCW. Is he in the rafters? Is he in the building today? Like no one even knows on that one yet. So we'll see on that. But yeah, go on then, Sean. What do you think about this match from the Team Liquid one?
So before the groups got drawn, I was sitting there. I was like, dude, the one match that I feel like they want is the Liquid match. And then in the the post game interview when they qualified, their player was like, the interviewer was like, who do you want to play? And they're like, Liquid Nuts. That's all they said. They were just like,
okay, called them out. Fucking hell,
like, bro, they literally want to play the team that I want them to play, and then they drew them, and I was like, oh, fuck.
So this is the style clash, then, right?
Yes, this is like the perfect style clash.
I want to see Chitu versus Nats so badly.
This is like the perfect game for them. Like they wouldn't beat Fnatic, they wouldn't beat Loud, but like at least in this round 1 game, because there's no footage. But this game, Liquid should be terrified. Liquid should be terrified because it's just like FaZe in CSGO. You can practice all the fuck you want. You can do any strat you want. You will never, ever play a team that can do the thing this team can do. They're like, you know, it's like fighting Mike Tyson. Like, you know, like you'll never get training that's equivalent to Mike Tyson in his prime. And that's what I think of when I watch EDG. It's like, you don't know what you're dealing with until you get punched in the face in the server. You're like, oh, like I can't jiggle the way I normally do. I'm scared. Like I can't do this like the way I normally do. Like these guys, like Gio said, their controller might take an opening duel. Like that's insane.
Right.
You might
very
lose your
role
smokes.
agnostic.
Right.
Yeah.
If people don't know, if people are from like they don't know the CS:GO reference, the team he's talking about, FaZe Clan, basically was like what every fan's dream of, like put all the best players on one team, so they had insane mechanical ability, and then their IGL was the best mid-round IGL. So as Sean's saying, it's like, how do you prepare for that? Because essentially you can't anti-strat that. He switches up with the mid-round, and as you say, you go to a spot thinking, right, they're going to attack like this, and then someone just one bullets you straight in the head. So it's like there is no game plan for that. You have to essentially just hope they miss, or just sort of almost get lucky with what your setup is.
So I actually think they're like more equivalent to like before Kerrigan joined FaZe. Though.
Oh,
like,
okay.
Like
when they were just all the skilled players with no IGL,
yeah,
right?
just the skilled players, no IGL.
Right.
Like that's what it's like when you watch them. And that's why I think like over time, the more reps they get, the better they're going to get.
Right.
And some insight into them is when I was coaching under Thieves at Champs and we were scrimming against them, they were playing us so tight in these scrims. Like we won all the pistols and we would barely beat them in the scrims. And I was like, Jesus Christ, like it's insane. But we were in chamber meta, and I was like, they're running like double duelist chamber, and the second chamber is nerf. Like,
right.
These guys are gonna get fucked. And they proved me wrong. They proved me wrong really quickly this event. And actually at lock-in too. Man, I remember eating breakfast one morning at like 9 a.m. in Turkey, and these guys had like, they were looking for scrims at like 10, 11 a.m. No other team was looking for scrims that early. And then I was going to bed, and they were looking for scrims at 8, 9, 10. Oh,
they just played all day,
PM.
right? I see.
They were playing like 13 hours of scrims.
Wow.
Like, that's like impossible.
Yeah.
Like, these guys' work ethic.
Oh, that's another thing, by the way. Look, obviously Korea's like almost got there, but haven't quite broken through and won. You know, the reason why I'm just waiting, because I've always told CSGO players, like, because I come from like, I've also watched StarCraft and League of Legends. Like, I know it's not about the game, just the amount of players they have, the amount of skill, and then its key is the work ethic. Like, if people don't know, in League of Legends now, the dirty secret they just try not to mention because it depress all Western fans is no Western teams practice even close to as much as the Korean and the Chinese teams. In fact, when the best TSM lineup ever years ago tried to do like the Korean style, like 3 scrim blocks, after like 6 months of it, they just said like it wasn't worth living. Essentially, like we just can't do this anymore. We just got to quit. Got to go back to 2. Like it just ruins your life. These guys, that's just normal life there. Like they really have a crazy like hunger and like a drive to play. And also part of it is like they are pretty ruthless in their teams. Like if they think you don't fit the culture, just get the fuck out. They'll bring the next guy in.
Exactly. Like it's just like the saucy and fraud thing we were talking about earlier, except it's just their entire like scene, right? Like it's just that's how it's built, is that work ethic. And to compare it to like NA work ethic, I'm not going to name the name, but one of the last boot camps I did in my career on like one of the top level teams I was on, I went to Europe and I was like, okay, we're going to grind. Like let's do like, 7 scrims, like 6, 7 scrims a day. My teammates were like, no, I can't. Like my eyes get hurt after like 5 scrims because we're like practicing beforehand. And so like physically they just refused to do it. Like I could not get them to play more than like 5, 6 scrims. And these guys just, they don't even know what that is. They don't know what like quitting is. Like I don't, like you even listen to KangKang's interviews and he's just giga confident. Like there's not an ounce of self-doubt. Like there's nothing he feels like he can't do. And it's so different. Like I have so much faith in this team. I love watching them. Like it's insane to watch.
Which one of them was it that there was the photo of him doing the like gun thing? Oh, that was KangKang?
Yeah. So this guy's a legit superstar, Duncan. Like he's the guy that's not going to miss a shot. He's going to do like emotes after he gets an insane clip.
Oh, he's actually shit talking too, right? Okay.
Yeah.
There's clips of him that I was watching on stream yesterday where he raps. He actually like an interviewer came up to him on stage and he just starts rapping in Mandarin. He sings in Mandarin. Like this guy is just like Michael.
So he's also got the charisma too, right? Okay.
He's the super.
I'm trying to find this
superstar.
picture. Oh, here we go. I know that this doesn't really like help the people who are watching, but I'm going to put it in our Discord chat so that you can.
I can put it in the VOD, so it's all good.
Okay, all right. It's just so good. Like
Here's the clip, Duncan. You should just watch it right now, dude. Like this guy is just the GOAT. He's like literally my favorite player. I'm not joking. He's fucking
How old
sick.
is he?
19.
Of course he is.
The GOAT.
Yeah. I love this team. Like, I didn't think I'd care about this team. I love this team.
Oh, right. When they sent T1 home, because obviously the China, Korea, like rivalry. Oh, right.
Yeah.
There's even like trash. By the way, that's also
brutal.
That's also gangster as fuck if you know, because if you know a little bit about League of Legends, you know that T1 fans are fucking nutters, mate. They are so intense. They're the ones that are sending trucks when the League of Legends team loses outside the building, like, fire everyone. So, like, the idea he's just talking mad shit on them is like, oh, it's too delicious.
Well, I think,
mate.
like,
it's too
because
good.
I've been just greening out over EDG, I'm sure, like, my phone knows that I just love EDG, so they're suggesting me, like, EDG League of Legends content.
Okay.
And,
all
like,
right.
did you see how that Uzi guy got leaked? There was like a fan that was in like a tree outside the headquarters.
Yeah, you're right. To see if this legendary player had joined the team again, you're right. Someone climbed up a tree, like shimmied, like literally out of like a car, like an anime or something, and then was like peeking through. And it even looks mad grimy. He's looking like there's like a leaf, and he's like looking through a window, like I've got him. He's in there. Oh, it's not in it at all.
That's gonna be Sean trying to see what KangKang.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's me, bro.
Here's the thing, though. You guys set it up really well, but give me some Team Liquid thoughts. Like, does Team Liquid actually lose here? Does Team Liquid, are they a team that can win the tournament for you, Sean?
Oh, man. I think they could win the tournament, but, like, they need to get by some of these, like, games, right? And I'm worried because they flopped that lock-in, so, like, they have a lot of internal pressure here. I think if they play too loose against EDG, they're going to get shot out the server. And if they play too buttoned up, then it's not going to feel like Team Liquid, right? Typically, like, Liquid has a lot of freedom given to Nats in the lurk role, and I guess they're a little bit more, like, flowy, right? Like, they do have set plays, like crazy set plays and stuff like that, and they'll bust out comps that are very unique, but they're also loose, and they use skill a lot in EMEA, and I swear to God, if they fucking do that against this team, they're just get bodied. Like, I don't know. I think this is a hard matchup for Liquid. But if they can get through it, they're in such a good spot. I think this is like a very, very difficult opening game for them, though. Okay.
By the way, I'll just tell everyone a brief story here. Here's why I actually do hold Sean Gares' predictions and analysis in high regard. Because we were once, every now and then when he didn't have teams, he would come and be an analyst with me in CSGO. And once we did an event, it was one of the Star Series events in Ukraine. And I remember him telling me, right, like, oh, I've been watching some of the demos. And actually, when Cold Zero, who was like the best player at the time, this really amazing clutch player from Brazil, he goes, when Cold Zero is in a 1v1 on Inferno, like on the B site, you'll notice what he does is he never moves from the actual bomb spot. Everyone else moves and moves around. He always just stays there, and it's like a double bluff. No one thinks he'd stay there. And I'm not even joking. Like, as he said this, like one round later, he just did that and won like a mad 1v1 against, like, I don't know, like Simple or something ridiculous. I was like, the fuck? I was looking at him like he had mutant abilities. Like, what the all right, fair enough. Okay. I see how it is, Sean. I see how it is. Okay.
I actually think I'm dog shit at these type of predictions and stuff. But I will say, the one prediction that I like always am like holding high is there was that one event in DreamHack Marseille. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. The one that Astralis won the first time.
That was the first Astralis win. And I said at that event, I'm like, this is going to be the best team ever.
Ooh, that's pretty legit because they were like, they were statistically easily the best team ever. Yes.
And that was when they were known as like chokers.
Yeah.
Like, no one had faith in this team. And I was like, you don't know what they're doing in practice. And you don't know what I see when I watch them. Like, they are the GOATs. That's how I feel. It's not yet for like EDG. Like I'm saying,
once they develop though,
it's fucking coming. Like, I can see it. I can see what's happening. Like, I see the progression as a team from when I was coaching 100 Thieves at Champions last year to lock in when I watched them to now. And I'm like, there's just no way. In like a year's time, they're not like in the top 4 of every event. There's just no way.
By the way, I also appreciate the way he did like the humble brag. He goes, I'm not really that good at predictions, but remember their greatest team of all time? At the first tournament I ever saw them play, I was like, they're probably the best team ever. Anyway, just that one. You know, I don't get them all right.
I do like bracket picks. So when I like
fair enough.
Picks, like I can spot like greatness, but I can't be able to guess like who's going to win all these coin flips because this is the most competitive bracket I've ever seen. There's so many coin flips. Every game is at best the 60-40 and like at worst a 50-50. Like, there's no game where I'm like, oh, this team is favored like 80-20. There's none of that.
Right, I alluded to it earlier, but obviously the weirdest part is, like, I've been checking the bloody subreddit every day, and there's still no info. Like, basically, no one knows if something will actually play at the LAN, or will he, like, just miss the first series, or will he just not be there at all? So they might play DRX and just have a different fifth player. Like, it's not going to be Venkai. So who knows what the fuck happens there? Is there a latest update? Does anyone know if something is going to be there?
I don't think there's any update. I'm coping so hard that he's there because
he's got to be, otherwise it sort of ruins it, right?
It really does ruin it, but it's very telling that Riot put them in the last match, right?
Right, to give them a chance, right?
Yes, because initially when the bracket was released, they were the first game,
right?
But Riot pushed their game to the last game, so it leads me to believe that there's a chance he's there, but it's like it's going to be like one of those things where it's like last second, and it sucks for PRX because they have to practice without him there. They have to assume that the worst is going to happen, right? You have to assume
of course.
The worst kind of thing.
You got to get your sub ready, whoever it is.
So,
mate, EG were in the same position. They made it to playoffs, so.
Yeah. So when you listen to like I've been listening to their VODs, like their vlogs and stuff. I love PRX. Like I'm such a fanboy of like a lot of these teams. It's weird. I like watching them because they have different styles, and PRX is crazy to watch, but if something isn't there, then Forsaken's going to be the duelist, and that sounds great because Forsaken was the duelist in the past, but he hasn't been lately, and it's just such a different vibe, right? Like when you play an entire split or season not in that role, and then they're asking you to do that role now in playoffs.
Yep. And what a role to lose. Like, you can't even hide a player like that. They have to just be really good. Like, that's not the role you want to lose, is it? Exactly. What do you think, Gio? If he arrives, is it all cool? By the way, because they got DRX, is it plausible they could win without him?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I would anticipate PaperX to win this. I mean, look, I've never really been on the DRX hype train at any time past, like, Masters Berlin. I think that DRX I personally think that they've hit their ceiling as a roster. And that, the story is that, you know, they can't beat fourth place. I don't think they are going to beat fourth place. I think something needs to change with that roster. And I think one of the big issues I have with DRX is they are so incredibly formulaic. Like,
that's the Korean way of playing, unfortunately. When they think they've got the style, you iterate. Yeah.
Sure, but like I think because like this roster has basically been around for so long, what suddenly has to happen for them to change that? Okay. Well, probably nothing while it's these 5 players and like their current thing. Like I think they need like something injected in them, some kind of stimulant legally acquired.
Okay.
I just like I'm just not. I'm like a fan of individual players on DRX, but I just don't have. I mean, I will say, look, bringing in Foxy9, has been an interesting attempt. But I think that when you see him play, you can kind of see the inexperience. I think that there are times where he almost is like an excitable puppy in some of the decisions that he makes and some of the shots he tries to take, and he's not necessarily well supported enough to kind of, he'll like run out into the road before like his responsible adult has like grabbed his arm. Do you know what I mean? And so like I'm a really big fan of individual plays. I think that, for example, in the game against EG, the person that you kind of constantly saw clean up the fucking mess of DRX was Marco, right? And again, he's like a very experienced player. He's got a lot behind him. And that's something that's really works well for them, but you can't rely on your successes coming from the fact that the backliner is going to come and clean up after everyone else is shed. And I just don't think that they have enough capability to be off the rails enough. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, I think they have their way of playing. They, for example, like post plants, they're always like playing for exits. They're never going to really like suddenly burst out on you and get super aggressive. They're going to hold their positions and they're just going to wait for you to walk into their trap. But the problem is the way that Valorant's being played by the best teams at the moment is those teams are going to come and punish you and they're going to avoid your trap because they know the trap's there. And so I just think they haven't really evolved fast enough with the way that the game is kind of going. So, not for this to turn into a like DRX hate tangent, but I just generally don't have a lot of faith in them to compete. Like, yeah, sure, maybe they could beat Paper X. Like, that's entirely possible. I don't think they will. And I think that regardless of what happens in this game, I don't think they're going to make a super deep run in the bracket.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, so they're the first team that's ever lost a reverse sweep best of 5. They lost the reverse sweep best of 5 to PRX, and that's what put them in groups. Like, that's insane. Like, a team like DRX, who typically needs to save strats, got actually fucked by losing a reverse sweep best of 5. Like, it shot them in the foot so hard this event. Like, I cannot believe they lost that final. And I fully blame their approach. I understand why they did it, right? Because when you look at past events, DRX would have like all these innovative strats. Like Gio said, like they were so structured, they're so buttoned up. But it was what I was saying earlier. Like by the end of the event, they would run out of steam because a team like NRG would have VODs and they would be able to anti-strat. A team like Loud, a team like Fnatic, like these teams, once they have footage of them, all of a sudden, like you can't do what they do with like 85 strats. You can only do it with a certain amount, right? Like, and they don't have the mid-rounding that NRG has. So they kind of run out of steam deep in tournaments. They try to combat that this event and throughout their entire season by having a 6-man rotation. So essentially, like, they're having 2 different teams, one Foxy 9 team and one Zest team.
Okay.
Now that's a brain dead idea in Valorant because you're splitting practice time between 2 teams. So they can't innovate the way they used to do. But I see why they did it. I see why. Because
I was just going to interrupt real quick and just say they were doing that even when they were Vision Strikers. They were just doing it with Stags, like in different role, but they were still doing that with the 6-man.
They kind of were back then, but like the game was so raw back then. And I feel like now it's just like you can't sacrifice practice time with like 2 different lineups. And it's not like it's map dependent. It's like day dependent. It's like both of these lineups play all the maps.
Yes.
It's so interesting. I've never seen anything like it because normally 6-man rotations work in Valorant where like, oh, we have our like fracture specialist because we're not going to run a duelist on fracture or something like that. So, like we want this second controller. So this guy is going to come in and be like something weird like that, right? Like, but they're just like, no, we're going to divide the prac time across all of the maps, across all of this shit. And it's so weird. It's like whenever they lose, they just are like, all right, Foxy 9, you're out. Zest, you're in. That's the solution. And that's exactly what they did here. That's exactly what they did in the playoffs in Pacific. They lost to PRX and then we never saw Foxy 9 again. Here, they lost to EG and the next game Foxy 9 wasn't playing. Like, that's just how they're pivoting off of their losses. And I don't think that's a good idea in Valorant.
I've got a couple of ticks on this, like, because this again, to me, a bit like the Chinese angle I gave you, to me, this is Korean esports. And the problem they're going to have, if the lens you talked about earlier is correct, Sean, is actually Korean esports in League is more like the CSGO meta. It's like, make no mistakes, play all the like percentages as well as you can. And that was basically how you do it in League of Legends. And so stylistically, it sounds like it's not the right game for them at the moment. And the sub thing, that is League of Legends. In League of Legends, right, they love to have a sub. It's often for like jungle, for example. If you've got like 2 different styles of jungle that are viable, you have like the tank jungler and then you have like the aggressive one. But here's why that would work in League of Legends. Because even though you're still splitting scrim time, which sucks, in League of Legends, there is only one map. It's just the Summoner's Rift. It's only the champions. So if you play different champions, it's fine. Yeah, in that scenario, you just practice them in solo queue. It's on the same map, by the way. But as you say, what doesn't work in CSGO, the only team to ever truly try the 6-man lineup was Vitality online when they had Nivera, right? And all they did, like Sean's saying here, was they just put him on like 2 maps only. You only play these 2 maps. You only play like AWP spots, basically. And spoiler, eventually they dropped that as well. Like, I know it got like banned by Valve, but that wasn't going to work long term because, as you say, even if you do a map split, well, then that guy's just not getting all the scrims. Like, what happens if in that scrim block you don't play as 2 maps? He just doesn't play. So essentially, in FPS games, we've sort of decided in CSGO the 6-man lineup doesn't work. So it sounds like they are meshing like League concepts with CSGO things with. And it just sounds like a mess at the moment. And the reason why I bring that up is because remember also, DRX is actually a real org. They're the ones who won Worlds in League of Legends. And if you know how the real orgs work in Korea, it's a very different system. The top coach of the whole org isn't like a guy who's game specific. He's like a guy who's just like sets the discipline, the structure. So they probably have like a way that they do things there essentially. And then they have the CSGO coach, I'm guessing Termy or whatever. And then he just implements the strats and the things. So it sounds like essentially, I mean, they'll learn at this tournament maybe. They maybe just need to like shift to a different approach to the game, which is going to be hard because Korean esports and a lot of other games has been fucking amazing. Obviously, it's been the best.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's not to say they can't beat PRX, even if something plays. Like, they've proven they can beat them. And even in the finals, like, it required, like I said, the first reverse sweep ever. They've proven they can beat this lineup. The problem is that PRX is going to come, like, with a loaded gun. Like, they're going to have so many pocket strats because they had to avoid groups. DRX will have to innovate and change things that they did in groups and look a little bit different. And that's going to be hard. But I think, like, if something doesn't play, again, like, I have them as probably favorites to win. If something does play, I think even then it's, like, still, like, 60-40. Like, DRX is still a very fucking good team. A very good team. But they're just not, in my eyes, contenders to win this event.
By the way, I'd also love to know, because tournaments do have this, where like at some point you have to actually submit the roster to the tournament. You can't really just have like the something guy come up in like a raincoat, like I'm here, motherfucker. Say you can't really do that. Like that's not like so. In theory, I assume like an hour before the game, 2 hours before, you eventually have to submit like, oh, he's playing or he isn't. But even so, like to find that out right before could be mad if it is just like an hour or half an hour before the game when you have to register it. We're like, who the fuck? If you're the DRX team, that could also throw you off. What if all your prep was for without him? You know,
true. Yeah, it's that. Like I said, man, this bracket's just
that's entirely possible. That'd be like, we are only going to prep for this one specific situation. If I had to put that on any team, it'd be DRX.
Right, okay, we've talked about all the teams, so let's just do this then. We'll wrap the episode after this. I've got a couple of simple questions. So I asked Gio before with the tournament who she thought she would win. She picked Loud, maybe Navi, Fnatic in the mix, etc. Right, Sean, who is going to win the tournament right now if you had to pick?
So my bracket, I have Loud winning. I'm a firm believer in the Harbor Viper. Truthfully, okay. I think it helps them that they skipped groups, so they're hiding a lot. I've watched them innovate pistols every week in Americas, which is like kind of hard to do actually. And they aren't the type of team that's going to go down easy, right? Like I said, there's only like 3 cores that have ever beat this team, right? So there's like 0 chance they go out 0-2. But the same can be said about Fnatic. Like there's 0 chance they go out 0-2.
Okay.
Like, so it's either, I think I have like Fnatic and Loud as like my heavy favorites, but I think I have faith in Harbor Viper over whatever Fnatic's throwing. And if they meet, then the footage is going to be out there of Fnatic. So like, I don't know what is going to happen. Obviously, Fnatic is so structured that they're definitely going to have solutions to playing against the Harbor Viper, but they don't have the reps in practice to understand what it feels like, right? You can always have a fucking solution, but you don't know what it's going to feel like when Loud does it to you. When Osbus is just like never missing and you can never kill him because his updrafts are like 2 more dashes. His cloud bursts are like 2 more dashes. You watch Osbus play around and it's like he has 6 dashes. It's insane the way he uses his utility. It's all perfect. It's all perfect all the time. Like, they're just one of one to me. Like, I don't know. I am the biggest Loud fanboy. I think Loud wins.
Okay. Are you sticking with Loud, Gio?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't. Do I need to add anything to
that's
that?
all good.
I think that.
Yeah.
And you got to remember, like, dude, you know Brazilian culture, Duncan.
Oh,
these guys lost a best of 5 on Brazilian soil to Fnatic.
Revenge, right? Okay.
When they were up 11-3 in the 5th map. I'm sorry. They lost when they were up 11-3 on the 5th map. That's how they lost on home soil. They will never ever forget that ever.
Okay.
Like I don't know. Like I think they're out for blood. Like honestly, and I just have a lot of faith in them.
Obviously, the joke would be, I could have guessed that Sean Gares would be a big fan of Loud. Probably the smoker position, your favourite, right? Shout out to all the people who know that reference. Not bad. Urban Dictionary, you don't have to explain everything to you. Right, here's the other question then. Who, Sean, is the best player in the world right now?
KangKang.
He's just already elevated to that stage.
This guy,
okay. All right.
This guy's fucking crazy.
Okay.
It's like, I would say it's either Dirk or Aspas.
Okay.
If you're talking about like, but then if you're talking like initiators, it might be like Chronicle or Leo. Like, see, and I'm going to learn really quickly, like in this event, because I'm just going off of theory. Like, I think Harbor Viper is better. But if initiators are better, then probably one of those two initiators on Fnatic is the best initiator or the best player in the world, because the initiators are more valuable. So I don't know. It really depends on like what the true meta is right now.
Where do you think Crashies comes in that?
Crashies is definitely up there, right? Because and I've said this a lot recently too. In the Harbor Viper meta in Americas, there's one initiator. So every piece of utility that initiator throws better be mega fucking valuable, right? Like, you're getting the info constantly for these two controllers, and like you're understanding what's happening around the map. And the way Crashies does it across all the maps is like insane. It's insane. It's like, I can explain it all, but to do it in the server so quickly is so special. Like, so yeah, I would put him up there too. It's hard. It's so hard to say who the best player in the world is in Valorant because of the roles. Yeah, I struggle to do that.
What about this then? Who would you pick? Obviously, this is pure theory craft. Who would you pick as the best in-game leader?
Oh.
Or who do you prefer at least? Who's your favorite? Who fucks with your style the best, do you think?
Oh shit, that's a good question. That's a really good question.
Because obviously, look, jokes aside, we've obviously eliminated Angel just for this tournament. No one can technically know, but you know.
Ouch.
I think it has to be like FNS, Boaster, and Sadak.
Okay.
But like, so I don't know what happens inside of Loud. Like, I don't know. They're like a black box. Like, but obviously his mid rounding is incredible. And for someone like FNS and Chet to like give him mad props time and time again, like, holy shit, like, this guy is hard as fuck to play against. Like, he is 2 steps ahead of us, it feels like at times. And
I feel like you've also got to be special to be an Argentinian player and get into a Brazilian lineup. So
yeah,
you've got to have some extra quality about you.
So I have to say, like, the way that he's stayed on top, like, throughout all these metas, and like he innovated the Harbor Viper for Americas, like, think about like the best team in the world taking a risk and having it pay off. Like, that's insane that he made that risk as the in-game leader of Loud. And because of that, I think I would want to put him up there. But then I've also seen the shit like FNS and Boaster have done. Like, Boaster has not had the best lineups, and the second he had a good lineup, he won the event. Like, and that just goes to show like what he's doing tactically is incredible. I don't know. Like, it's definitely one of those three. It's hard to go wrong. I would definitely build a team around any of them.
Who are you taking, Gio? So
the 3 names you said were the 3 names that I was also stuck between. I think that so a couple of things I think to add, like a differentiation that you didn't mention is, I think for me, FNS, I think, has, in my opinion, probably of the 3 of them, the sort of like highest average results over a consistent period of time, if that makes any sense. Like, because I think when you think of where his core has been over the last year and a half, I don't think he's ever really dipped. I think there have been times where Boaster's core has, and there is a difference in that FNS has basically had to change like 1 player in that time, right? And Boaster has had a different situation.
And he's had CS pros. He's all CS pros that he's with,
yeah,
which is a total different. Like, you don't have to
like,
teach people the fundamentals.
All of these factors make it so hard to actually, like, I think that's one of the hardest things about picking an IGL is, at the end of the day, like, I'm not in game, so I don't know, I can't tell you, right? But Boaster is a very academic IGL, which I have like mad respect for, but I think that the IGL style that we hear about from someone like Sadak or FNS is the style that, you know, how you just put it, Duncan, like, whose style do you fuck with the most? I think for me, like, that I find to be really impressive, but also kind of less risky. Like there's a kind of risk with the style that Boaster has where it's like, this is crazy how much work he puts in outside the game to prepare so much stuff, but it's also, it's more brittle, right? So it's like if you go in and you have all of this structure and you're just against someone who can adapt against that really quickly, and you would need to go away and pre-plan in order to come back with something. Now, that's not to say that Boaster can't mid-rank. I mean, what happened at Lock-In wouldn't have happened if, like, he couldn't. But I just mean there is a big stylistic difference there. And I am very fond of the style that you kind of see from someone like FNES and Sadak. Because, interestingly as well, like, you know, Sean, you mentioned that Sadak innovated the Harbor Viper and this has made such a huge difference. But if you think of, like, stage 1 optic from last year and, like, for example, the neon comps that they were running and stuff like that also defined the meta at the time, like FNS has done the same thing. He may not have done the same thing for this season, but he's done the same thing. And so for me, like, I think that if you're looking on a lens that's on a much smaller time scale, maybe I would lean more towards Sadak because I think he's incredible. But I think if you zoom the lens out and you take it all the way back to, you could go to stage 3 2021, because don't forget that Envy came second at Masters Berlin. I think that FNS probably overall gets the title. Okay. For me.
Okay, I think I'm gonna go. So you like really broke it. You helped me like think through things a lot. So I'm gonna say Sadak.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna say Sadak.
Okay.
Because I think yeah, he's like innovated the game a lot. He's proven he can mid-round. He's proven he can make deep runs in tournaments and like anti-strat. And he's done it with different lineups with very inexperienced players. He's got them up to speed super fucking fast. And I don't know how he did it. Like, I don't know how they look so good so fast. So I think because of that, I'm going to go with him because he's done the similar things as FNS. And the biggest thing that I think is when I look at like in the game, so there's different vibes you can have as an IGL. You can be like the super serious one that keeps a very serious tone and vibe. And that's what I think of when I think of FNS is like, he's always very serious when he's on the stage. You'll very rarely catch a smile. And that's the opposite when you watch like Boaster and Sadak. And I think it's important to have pretty good vibes when you're playing a game. It's just that way your teammates don't feel that pressure. And that's probably why he's able to do it with like these newer players is he can like command their respect as like a person and then get them to buy into his system. And he now has like the actual accolades for them to just, you know, like no matter who he plays with now, they're just going to listen to him blindly. And the same thing would probably happen with the other two. But I think doing it with multiple lineups, doing it across multiple metas, innovating, and these are things that FNS has done. I think that, yeah, it's definitely going to be between like Sadak and FNS, but Boaster has innovated the game also like at an insane level with like Minnie, the coach. It's just, I think like deep in tournaments when like the fundamentals show, like the mid-rounding and stuff like that, it seems like all of the players of Loud and NRG are on that wavelength. The difference is that NRG, like I said, has all like a decade of CS experience, whereas Loud players haven't, and Fnatic players haven't either. So I'm saying Sadak, like he's done it all, and there's like 0 marks I can give him that are like bad as like an IGL.
By the way, the other thing that is always wild when people swap games is obviously someone could just be bang average in one game and then they're like a god in the next. Like for me, it's mad to see that like Crashies and Victor, or Food, as I will always call you. But you can call yourself Victor if you want. You can change your name if you want, you know. I mean, you know, shout out Marv, he's trying to escape his past too. But you know what? That Grim Reaper's still coming, mate. Richard Luke's going to get you, I'm telling you. So just keep running for now. But it's like, you're just like fucking, what's it like, Final Destination. He's going to get you in the end. He'll appear with that documents. But then again, to be fair, I had the same experience from 1.6 to CSGO because there was these 2 players in CS 1.6. One was called Hiko, and he was you know. And then there was this guy, Sean G at Res. And I was like, who the fuck are these? I mean, they're okay. They're like invite players. And all of a sudden, they're like really good in CSGO. So you never can judge a book by its cover, right? You never know who's good, right, Sean?
Whoa. I was on the best 1.6 team in NA by the end. Remember when
that is because the whole scene had died down, to be fair. But yeah, you are right. Yeah, that's true. It
was like I was left
by
a
technicality.
Ashes.
Yes, exactly.
I was the cockroach that was left.
Yes, you survived the nuclear war, winter or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
When everyone went to CGS for the money and I just wasn't good enough to make that transition, I stayed.
It worked out for you in the end.
True.
As Mary J. Blige said in her track, All I Need, you're all I need to get by, which is the case for me and my Patreon community who support this channel and these videos. Some of them include Theogony, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Joseph Adcock, Tosh, Bot Pounder 420, Thooorin, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Yurka, and a special thanks always to the main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask a question in my regular video AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who upcoming guests are. Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content, or you want to take part in one of those longer esports discussions with me where we go all over the place. Well, if any of those grab your fancy, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Risk Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.